We are so glad to have you all tuning in for this highly requested program. As we all know, navigating BFRBs can be quite challenging. The holidays can add additional layers of stress and anxiety. We are joined today by Dr. Christy Garner, a BFRB community fan favorite, who will help walk us through some gems of wisdom to manage our BFRBs during what can be a very challenging time for all of us. Dr. Christy Garner earned her natural science degree from the College of St. Benedict. Following her passion for holistic medicine, she received her Doctor of Chiropractic degree from Northwestern Health Sciences University. She is passionate about finding the simplest tools that make the biggest difference for people in achieving health and happiness. She offers a unique blend of heart and head as she combines her knowledge and training with her own personal experience and real-life navigation of living with trichotillomania and dermatillomania since age 9. Assisting Dr. Christy in our Q&A today will be TLC's Hannah Schaben. We are so grateful to have Dr. Christy here with us, and participants, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today. And now I'm happy to pass it off to Dr. Christy. Welcome, Dr. Christy.
Thank you. What a warm welcome. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and get started today. And the first thing I want you just to invite you to do is just take this moment just to take a deep breath into your heart. Just really drop in. I'm sure we all had wild days and it takes a lot to actually show up here together. So just take 1 second and let's wiggle our bodies. Those of you who know me know I'm a big fan of wiggling. So we're just going to wiggle and drop and just take a couple breaths into our heart. Just really feel ourselves here in this place. Grateful for our connections. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, and today what we're going to do is I'm going to be sharing 5 of the most helpful things that I've found during the holidays. And these apply to any time of year, but especially for the holidays. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And what I want to let you know is that as we're going through with each gem, I invite you to participate. This is really going to be a collaborative. So I'm going to share things that work for me, but as you're sitting there and you're listening, I want you to think about what questions are arising for you, what thoughts are arising, because I'm going to give opportunities for us to pitch and catch a little bit, because that's really where the magic happens, is when we can interact and connect with each other. All right, so I don't know about you, but I feel it. I'm feeling a lot from these past couple years. You know, just to set the context, I think a lot of us who are highly sensitive, and those of us with BFRB behaviors tend to have highly sensitive nervous systems. This has been a lot these last couple years. And so I just want to first acknowledge that, and to acknowledge you, that if you're feeling more stressed than you have in past holidays, or if little things seem to be irritating you on a much deeper place, I just want to let you know that you're not alone. I'm feeling that myself as well. And so the things I'm sharing with you today aren't theory. They're actually the things I do every day. And I'm going to be doing to support myself during the holidays. So just to reiterate the places that I'm sharing from with you. So I'm sharing from my place of a clinician. So my background is in chiropractic. So the brain and the nervous system and things to support it is my area of clinical domain. And then I'm also sharing from the place of myself. I am actually the trifecta. I've a puller, picker, and a biter. I started pulling my hair when I was 9 years old, and I don't have a recollection of a time when I didn't pick my skin. And what I realize is that I actually do both of these behaviors because of my repetitive biting. And so we'll talk more about that when we get into some of these steps I'll share with that. So I'm sharing with you the things that have helped me personally. And then I'm also a mama. of a 19-year-old daughter who also has worked through these behaviors. And so I'm sharing from that role of a parent. So I'm happy to field and connect with you in any one of those 3 domains as we go along. All right, so we're going to take it away with gem number 1. And my first tip is to make yourself comfortable. So the first thing I want to just throw out there is lots of holiday clothes are super uncomfortable. They're like extra itchy and scratchy. And, I'm thinking of like holiday sweaters and these like dresses and tights and all of these things that go along with holidays. Dress shoes often are excruciating for both women and men. All these fancy hairdos, a lot of them are super irritating to the scalp. And on top of all of that, they're often really chilly in the middle of a time when it's cold out. And so the first gem I'm going to suggest is just simply to make yourself comfortable. I know it sounds so simple, but it really makes a huge difference. And so let me walk you through a little of the research. So for each of these gems, I'm going to connect you with a piece of research. So this is research that's been done on tactile sensitivity. And that just means how we feel, basically. And the summary of this is that individuals with BFRBs report decreased tactile thresholds. And what that means is we feel little things. So for example, I can give you an example today that happened to me. I was in the garden and I was stomping around in my boots and it's really muddy. And I could feel my socks sliding down inside my boots. And it kind of went off my heel and it started rolling underneath my foot. And I made it for maybe 10 minutes. And then I just couldn't take it anymore. I was like, I can't stand this feeling that's in my boot. And so I had to stop and completely take everything off, pull my sock back up, because that sensation was so intense for me that my brain couldn't focus on anything else until I took care of that. So that would be an example of decreased tactile thresholds. My daughter Jaden really struggled with tags in clothing, the little edges of lines on socks, itchy or scratchy underwear. All these things actually matter for those of us who are sensitive. And so here are some suggestions on how can we support ourselves during the holidays, given that a lot of us have this extra sensitivity. So the first is just simply, wear comfy clothes with textures you can rub. This is one of my favorite go-tos. Sometimes our clothes, we can actually make them be a sensory stimulator, just something that can actually help us rather than being irritating. So I love to have like a little bit of this rib, for example, on the edge of my sweater right now, or it might be a little piece of velvet or a crinkled seam on something that I can rub my hands over that brings me comfort. So that's one thing, wear comfy clothes, but the key is comfy. Something that you feel good in. Next step, I'd suggest wear your hair in a way that feels comfortable. I mean, we don't have to buy into that things have to look a certain way. So wear your hair in a way that feels good to you. If wearing it updos, I know for myself, my bald spots were really present behind my ears. And so anytime I wore my hair in an updo, I was always just super self-conscious. And that's not a fun way, especially when you're connecting with people, to have to constantly be like angling to try, to have not people notice, or just have to have that in your space. So that's one thing I'd empower you to do, is just wear your hair in a way that feels comfortable to you. Consider rocking sneakers. I'm known for, I can be wearing the dressiest of dressy clothes, and I still will be wearing either sneakers on my feet or some kind of a comfortable slip-on shoe. I just completely refuse to wear uncomfortable shoes. Life is too short. So I want to plant that seed of possibility for you as well. Give yourself extra time. my daughter Jaden taught me this one. So just to take the pressure off, like when you're getting ready for a party, there's already the anticipation of how's it going to go. A lot of us have social anxiety. And so just all of that is building up inside of us. And so one of the gifts you can give yourself is just give yourself a little extra time as you're getting ready, just to take some of that pressure off. I found that really helpful. A lot of these clothes are chilly, so bring a blanket or a wrap. So I'll give myself away right now. So if you can see my camera, I actually have a weighted blanket that I have right on my lap as I'm talking to you. I find that if you've attended my webinars before, we've talked about revving, how the nervous system is revving. And so in short, when our system is high, when our anxiety is high, oftentimes our extremities, our body will feel quite cold. So that's one of the things I often teach people is to feel the temperature of your hands to get an idea of how your nervous system is revving. And so when you're cold, it causes a feedback loop in your body, so that the colder you are, the more anxious you feel. And the more anxious you feel, the colder you feel. And so it kind of starts this vicious circle. So one of the simplest ways that you can comfort yourself is just simply to warm yourself up. So you might want to grab, here I have a warm cup of tea, a warm blanket, a wrap. I sometimes use a hot water bottle. Just these little things can make such a big difference in how you feel. So for example, even if it's good stress, that's one of the things I want to share with you is that even your brain can't differentiate between like stress that feels bad for you or stress that feels good for you. It still is stress, and your body is going to respond accordingly. And so one of the best ways you can nourish yourself is to give yourself some warmth and some soothing in that time period. So when I present to you, it's good stress. I'm super excited to be here with you today, but my system still registers it as stress. And so my anxiety shoots out, my hands get freezing cold. And so I know that in order to stay in a really nice, balanced, grounded place to be with you, it really helps me to have my weighted blanket and my warm tea. So I wanted to share kind of behind the scenes with you to let you know that these are just really helpful little things that make a big difference. And the last thing I'd suggest within this topic is just leveling the playing field. Some of us are really comfortable like rocking our bald spots, our shaved heads, wear our scars with pride, and that's amazing. And then there's a lot of us who aren't comfortable with doing that. And I'm in that category. And so I think it's really okay to level the playing field. And so what I do for myself, for example, is if I have bald spots, I'll use something called Topic. There's other brands as well. It's a hair fiber, and you can put that on to cover your bald spots. And it just gives that sense of relief and comfort that's just one less awkward conversation that you might need to have because you've leveled the playing field with everyone else. Oftentimes I'll wear a hat. I was kidding with the staff earlier that, during the cold part of the year, I'm rocking a beanie for a lot of the moments of my life. It's just really comforting to wear a hat. And so that's another thing you can do during the holidays. You can wear long pants and sleeves if you are covering up any scars. And for the biters, you can use some type of, a fake nail. And again, not in an attempt because we have anything to be ashamed of. And in fact, we're going to talk about this. There's nothing to be ashamed of, but this is also something that is our own, and it's nobody's business. And actually we get to decide when we feel safe and who we feel safe with sharing these behaviors. And so I think that there's nothing wrong if you also want to keep things safe and quiet. especially during the holidays when we're surrounded by people who might not be as educated about sensitivity, about these behaviors. And so I want to support you in doing whatever feels great to you. Okay, so I'm going to introduce this healing. This is where we're going to start engaging with each other. So I want to know, in relationship to just this very first topic of just making yourself comfortable, I'd love to hear from a couple of you. What ideas do you have? What have you found that's helpful for you? And so I call this crowd healing, and I just want to introduce this topic. So I really am of the belief that these behaviors and what's going to help us is going to arise predominantly out of us community members. I'm so grateful for researchers and practitioners and all of these professionals. But I think within us, within our community, we actually have a lot of untapped wisdom and knowledge. We're all living in these bodies where we know what it actually feels like to be living and breathing with these sensitivities. So we have a lot of wisdom and insights to share with each other. So in this presentation, I really want to invite, this isn't just about me talking to you. I'd love to hear what other ideas you have. So go ahead and raise your hand, and Hannah will call on you and just share, one thing that you found helpful to be able to help yourself feel comfortable, physically comfortable during the holidays. And Hannah, I'll go ahead and let you call on someone.
So I don't see anybody with their virtual hand up yet.
Okay, great.
But I will say that the tags and the clothes and the blanket and the warm tea, that really resonated with me. And I do see in the chat box that Hillary said to go with the hot, also having something cold to drink when I rev too low.
That's great. And so Hillary, thank you for bringing that up. So this topic that we're taking on today, I'm kind of glossing over these things, but that is something that we talk about together, is really getting in touch with how our nervous system is revving and what we need in each moment. And so I mentioned that when we're anxious or revving high, oftentimes one of the cues is that we'll feel our hands being cold. But on the very other side, like you're pointing to, it can also be when we're revving low, and that might be when we're bored or we're zoning out. Oftentimes when we're riding in a car, watching TV, all of these times when actually the behaviors are really sneaky because we often aren't as aware during this time. That's where things that are cold can be really great. Because if you check in with your hands when you're just kind of like zoning out and watching TV, you'll often find that they're really hot. And so the reason for that is when our nervous system is revved up, everything restricts, all the blood comes into our muscles because it's getting ready to fight or flight. And so they get cold. And on the counter side, when we're super relaxed, all the blood goes out to our extremities. And so that's why they feel warmer. So there's actually science behind why we feel what we feel. So that's a great addition. So feel your hand temperature, and then you can do whatever it is, do the opposite. If they're hot, then reach for something cold. If your hands are ice cold, then reach for something hot. So thank you. That's a really beautiful suggestion. Do we have any others coming in?
That's a wonderful suggestion. Appreciate that. We have a couple people that have raised their virtual hands. I'm going to first call on Chelsea because I saw hers go up first.
Hi, Chelsea.
Hi.
Oh my gosh, lovely to hear your voice.
Thanks. It's great to be here. It's so nice for you to share from your own experience and heart. It's great. So the first thing that came to mind for me was being clean, like taking a hot shower or something prior to those experiences, as well as like taking some time for myself, whether it's like stretching or doing yoga or getting in my body in some way, just being in my body, things that help me get in my body.
Oh, I love that. And I can totally connect to that. For me, I'm a bath girl. And so before like something that I know is going to take a lot out of me, if I can squeeze in a bath or a shower beforehand, it's just so soothing. That's really beautiful. And what do you feel, Chelsea, when you stretch into your body? What do you notice?
I just feel, I mean, more flexible physically and mentally. Like I feel like there's more space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I feel too. It's that's one of the things I love about yoga and even stretching. You know, it doesn't have to be any specific form of yoga, but I've really found true for myself that the more flexible I am in my body, the more flexible I am in my mind. So that's neat that you share that as well.
Thank
That's
you.
great. Well, thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
Let's call on one more person, Hannah.
Okay, I see Alicia, and I'm also going to call on Hosa as well.
Great, Alicia.
Hi, good evening for me. How are you?
I'm very good, Alicia. Nice to be connected with you.
Nice meeting you. I'm calling from London, originally Spanish, but I'm actually very curious and interested at your approach, because I've found out that I am a highly sensitive person, and I noticed that all what you're commenting and talking about, the high sensitivity and itchiness, and I'm a hair puller since I was a child, and I totally feel and connect and identify with all what you were saying. It's unbelievable. So I just wanted to add that for me, yoga actually is been my lifesaver. And the way I feel it is like, for an instant, I just forget about all my high sensitivity, my intense emotions, my perception of everything. And suddenly it's like I really connect with my essence, and all this, whatever is going on that is causing all these things disappear. And I feel really good.
Oh,
So I just wanted to add this.
Yes, that's beautiful. You know, I can really relate to that feeling of dropping into the body, you know, so like so much of our lives we spend up here in our brains. And so anything, I think yoga, anything we can do to drop into our bodies and have that feeling of like, we're okay, I'm okay. One of the things I want to share with you as we're going through this, I'm going to talk a lot about sensitivity, but I love what you're pointing to in that our sensitivity isn't something that's wrong with us. In fact, it's a really beautiful part of ourselves. You know, we're, along with the sensitivity, we also oftentimes are more creative, conscientious, empathic, intuitive, right? So there's all this beauty within sensitivity. And then there's like the responsibility of like, I also need to care for my sensitivity. And it sounds like for you, yoga is a big part of that caring.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. That's really beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
my
you.
pleasure. All right, Hannah, one more, and you have someone connecting through Hosa?
Oh no, we're good to move on.
Okay, great, perfect. All right, so this brings us to gem number 2. And this is to keep your blood sugar balanced, which is a lot easier said than done during the holidays, because it's like we all celebrate through food. And of course, it's not like we're not celebrating around broccoli or, you know, some like really balanced meal. It's pretty much like through butter and sugar, at least in my extended family. So tons of sweets, lots of fatty fried foods, irregular eating schedules, like tons of snacking. And so one of the things I wanted to share, this is actually really brand new research. In fact, I came across it as I was putting together our presentation today. This was research done and just published at the end of November of this past year in relationship to nutrition and our behaviors. And so the takeaway is that sugar intake, was significantly related to higher compulsive behaviors, and a combination of high fat and high sugar is connected to increased impulsivity. So what we eat matters. And one of the things I thought was so beautiful in the conclusions that the researchers put in is they highlighted that nutrition in these disorders is really important, and clinical work should address not only the psychiatric symptoms, but also the impact of lifestyle, of overall health. And so we're going to talk about this as we go through our time together. But when we're sensitive, it actually really does matter what we put into our bodies. In fact, it probably matters more so for us than other people because we are so sensitive. And so one of the things I want to tell you is nuts are your friend. So when we're trying to keep our blood sugar balanced, you don't have to be perfect. You know, sweet is one of the 5 tastes. It's an important taste. So I'm not a fan of like cutting out sweet entirely in life. But it is good to balance, to slow down how blood sugar breaks down in our bodies. And so nuts are really helpful because they have quite a bit of protein and quite a bit of healthy fat in them. So if you can eat a handful of nuts. So one thing I've trained myself to do is I often, first of all, I bring nuts or some type of a trail mix or a protein bar with nuts. I always have something in my purse, because if you can eat this before you eat whatever sweet that you want to eat, it'll just slow everything down. And it's going to prevent your body from having these super high spikes of blood sugar spiking and then crashing and spiking and then crashing. Because what I've found is that it's at the high and the low of blood sugar where urges get loud, you know, so like I'll speak for myself when I have a lot of sugar, which happens sometimes because I love licorice. I'll enjoy that and I'll get kind of this temporary high, but then my nervous system will start revving high and I'll notice that my urges get really loud. And then after a period of time, I crash when all that sugar gets burned up. And so then my energy slumps. And that's when I tend to rev low and my kind of, you know, unconscious urges will arise. And so if you can keep blood sugar stabilized, it prevents you from having all of those swings. And so nuts and seeds. So if you're allergic to nuts, seeds are another really great way to do that. It could be sesame seeds, it could be flax seeds, pumpkin seeds. These are all great as well. And another tip is to have a filling breakfast before you go to any of the parties. So giving yourself some really great protein, you know, give yourself some grounding before you head into any of the holiday parties. Is really helpful as well, just to keep yourself really stable. You know, sometimes I'll even eat a little bit of a meal before I go to a party or a gathering, just so that I already know that I've been nourished, so that then when I go, it's just kind of lighthearted and fun. You know, I can kind of just choose to participate in the food or not, but I'm not reliant on what the whim of whatever people are serving. Because I have found for myself and my daughter that I am, you know, quite sensitive to blood sugar spikes. I am quite sensitive to artificial colors and artificial sweeteners and things that a lot of people, they don't have an issue with. My body and my nervous system does. So it's nice to be empowered in that way. And so here's a recipe I wanted to share with you. This is like a party hit. If I had a party hit, this is one of the things I often volunteer to bring. So when I'm invited to a party, I'll say, oh, great, I'll bring a snack or I'll bring a sweet. And I bring these coconut date munchkins. And they have a fun backstory. So a lot of my clinical practice has been in the field of autism. And so I've specifically worked with a lot of kids with autism who have repetitive behaviors. And a lot of them were addicted to munchkins from Dunkin' Donuts. And so parent after parent would come in and I'd like ask the diet, and a child's diet would only be like 5 foods. And one of them would be a Dunkin' Donuts Munchkins. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we have to find a replacement for this. And so I just started playing around in my kitchen. And this has been the closest I can get to something that tastes super good, that almost every kid loves, that I love, that my daughter loves, that, you know, guests love. And it also is filled with great oils and really balanced sugar. So you can adjust, you know, the nuts if you'd like. I use medjool dates because they help to release blood sugar much more slowly than processed sugar. The coconut also has some great oils in it. And so then you can just play with this as a base recipe. You know, you can add cacao if you want. You can add any other flavors. You can add peanut butter. You know, you can add whatever is really delicious to you. But these are really fun little snack that you can bring to parties. And it's also nice for you to be able to grab and go. So I almost always have a Tupperware of these in my fridge. And it's kind of my go-to, like when I want a little sweet something, this is what I reach for. Okay, so I would love to hear from you. What have you noticed? You know, so I introduced a piece of research of what we've seen, but what have you noticed in your own experience with what you eat or what you drink and your behaviors? I'd love to hear from a couple of you. So you can feel free to go ahead and raise your hand and we can call on you, or you can write something in the chat and Hannah can read it if you prefer not to interact.
So we've got some comments.
Great.
One says, cutting down on sugar was a huge success for me. And I do notice when I eat more than my body can handle because it's hard to resist urges.
Mm-hmm.
And then somebody asked, what about sugars and alcohol? Any suggestions?
That's a good question. So alcohol does break down very quickly in the body to sugar. And so a lot of us also have quite a negative response to alcohol. In addition to it challenges our detoxification pathways, which that's another topic for another webinar. But many of us also have a bit of sluggish detoxification pathways. So that can be challenging on two levels. So I think that it's also makes a lot of sense to regulate alcohol, and at the very least, alternating between water and hydrating yourself if you're going to have some alcohol. I do want to also add that it's really natural to crave sugar, especially when we're feeling anxious and under pressure. So I'll speak for myself, but I know a lot of people won't guess it because I love to teach and I just absolutely love connecting in this way. But personally, I'm quite private and I really struggle with social anxiety. And so for me to go to a party takes a lot for me to show up and engage in small talk and to do this societal dance. It just takes a lot of energy for me. And so I find myself craving sugar because sugar, when it goes into the brain, it has a very sedative effect. And so a very calming effect on the brain. And so it's really natural for us to crave sugar intensely, especially when we're in these social situations and we're not comfortable. So I just want to let you know, a heads up, that it's really normal if you're craving more sugar than normal. And so just to meet that craving and giving yourself some sugar options that are a little more balanced and nutritious. So dates are beautiful. Coconut sugar is another nice option. Molasses is a great option. Some of these, I also use stevia. I use a little bit of xylitol, or my favorite is actually something called monk fruit, which is another sweetener. So just offering to our bodies, you know, it's craving it for a reason. It's like, hey, I could use a little calming here. So then think about, what are all the ways I could offer my body calming? Well, one thing we talked about is weighted blanket, you know, something warm, warm tea. And then another thing you can think about is, okay, let me give some great, some healthier sugar options. What else do we have, Hannah?
Some realizations coming to light. Sugar on an empty stomach is the worst, and attending to thirst in general helps me. If I'm thirsty, I feel off. I can relate to that.
Yeah, I can too.
Somebody also said, sugar is very inflammatory, so it makes my achy joints worse, as well as makes me more sensitive, thus leading to more picking.
Mm.
And
Yes.
then staying away from caffeine.
I was waiting for someone to bring up caffeine. I was hoping that was going to come up. So that's another one that I've definitely found that my nervous system, and again, think about, I like to think of our nervous systems as like the Porsche Carrera of nervous systems. So we might have like a narrower range of just right? So we can tip more easily into over or understimulated, but like when we're in our zone, like we're a high performance nervous system. You know, that's what I try to envision myself. Like I have this amazing like nervous system, but I do find that caffeine is like putting in like the worst gas into my high performance Porsche Carrera nervous system. It just really makes my system rev all over the place. Like I'm up and I'm down, I'm crashing. And and again, we're all unique and different. So that could be something as well, is to look at what are some alternatives to caffeine. And I know for a lot of people, like messing with your morning coffee is like, forget about it. That's like a serious violation. So one of the things that I do in my practice is we slowly start incorporating a coffee substitute. And the one I often use is called Ticino. And I'll put it in the chat so you can see how it's spelled. Ticino is a tea that's made from roasted chicory, and it has a beautiful, rich taste. And they actually have like a French roast that tastes very much like coffee, but it doesn't have caffeine in it. And so you can slowly start to use more Ticino and less coffee, and then ramp your way that way. And that way you still get that warming sensation. I think actually what a lot of us crave is we crave that warmth and that calming in our body. And that's why like our cup of coffee or a cup of warm something feels like such a whoopee for us. And so it's just a consideration of, is there something else warm that we could put in our cup that's going to be really supportive for our nervous system? All right, so let's do one more reflection. Is there anyone who'd like to talk a little bit on camera, or is everyone happy with just writing in the chat?
I don't see anybody's hand. Oh, there goes one.
Great.
All right, I'm going to call on Michelle.
Hi, Michelle.
Hola, ¿cómo estamos? Lo que yo quería decir es que desafortunadamente se nota que si
What I want to
tomo
say
más
is
azúcar,
that
arranco
I
más.
noticed
Que es
that
bien difícil porque me
if I
encanta el
eat more
azúcar.
sugar,
¿Qué te parece? O sea, ¿cuál sería algo que puedo hacer para ayudarlo?
if I eat more sugar, it affects me more. What can I do to help?
So Michelle, when you eat more sugar, you find that it affects you more. Do you find that your urges to do your behaviors get stronger when you eat more sugar?
Sí.
Yes.
Yes, me too. So you're not alone. So I think that one of the best things to do, I think you've already done, you've noticed. I think noticing is step one. So that's a wonderful start. So I would suggest looking at what are some things that you can do to keep your blood sugar more balanced. So more nuts would be one thing. And when you eat sugar that's going to break down more slowly. So I would suggest using dates instead of sugar in your recipes. And also, whenever possible, you might want to use maple syrup as well. Those are two nice shifts, that a little bit of a shift can make a big difference. And Hosa, can you translate that back for Michelle?
I think she should be able to hear it through Janet.
Oh, perfect. Great.
Sí, claro. De
Perfect.
nada, gracias.
My pleasure. Thank you, Michelle. All right. This is great. And so I hope that you're, as we go through these next three, I just want to keep encouraging you to really, the goal of what we're doing together is not just to fill your brain with information. We want this to drop down into your real life experience. So I want to challenge you to listen from the place of your real experience. And so think about, how is your life? How does this show up in your life? And the more that you can engage, whether it's through the chat or with me or just speaking things out loud, it's going to solidify this information so that it's really in your body. It's not just something that you're going to forget. So that's why I'm really encouraging you to interact, because it's going to really help you so much more than just listening to this presentation. Okay, gem number 3 is to be prepared to be bored. This is a big one during travel and parties. There's just lots of sitting around during the holidays. We don't have school, we don't have work, we're doing lots of driving, we're doing lots of flying. And for a lot of us, these are times and areas where our urges can get really loud. So I'll speak for myself. It's like when I am just sitting around on the couch just for hours on end, I can feel myself kind of doing like just slumping. And that's where I noticed that my brain, I know those of you with these behaviors, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, where you'll like be engaged, but your brain starts to kind of like drift off. So it's like you're kind of paying attention, but you're kind of not, and you just kind of start zoning out. And that's when I find my hand will start like feeling for some stimulation. I might start doing this with my hair. I might start rubbing my arms, looking for something that's, gives me a different texture. And so I'm looking, if we pay attention and trust that we don't do these behaviors for no reason, what we're looking for is stimulation. We're looking for, hey, my nervous system is like, ugh. And so what stimulation can I give myself? And so that's where our behaviors of pulling, picking, or biting, they're actually very effective at giving us stimulation into our nervous system, because we do them in places where we have lots of nerve endings. You think about it, our skin, we have all kinds of nerve endings. Think of all the hairs that stand up, and we have feelings. Our hair, our scalp has tons of nerve endings. A lot of us bite the insides of our cheeks or our lips, tons of nerve endings. So we do these behaviors in places where there's maximum input into the nervous system, and it gives that little jolt that we need. So I like to share that, because when you understand that you're not doing these behaviors for no reason, they actually have a purpose, then we can say, okay, how else can I give my nervous system that same stimulation that doesn't end up with bald spots or wounds or nails bitten or cheek or lips, bit. So looking at kind of what's behind the behaviors, that's what we're looking at. So a couple tips I can give you for boredom. First, I'm just going to share with you, here's a piece of research that was published by Cambridge University Press. And the majority of BFRBs were triggered by anxiety, so 78%. A feeling of tension was 70%. But boredom is a big one, 52% of BFRBs triggered by boredom. So I think that this is something that we just really want to be prepared for and be prepared to be bored. And so I'm going to share with you this is my absolute lifesaver for my BFRBs. My BFRBs, and to give you an idea, so I was not one of these people that was fortunate when I was young to have had any education, to have parents who understood. There was no TLC foundation when I was younger. So I was just silently doing these behaviors, trying to hide them from the world. And I tried all kinds of things to support myself, and I failed miserably for like 20 plus years. And I just did my absolute best to keep, things super, super covered. So that's another thing we could talk about. Like I'm a pro at hiding my BFRBs, styling my hair and skin and all these things, right? And I'm sure a lot of you can relate. But everything changed for me when I really understood what was happening in my brain and nervous system. And I found something specific to help me. And it was as simple as a toothpick. And so I'm going to share that with you in just one moment. So the first tip I'm going to give you related to this is when you're bored, posture matters. So when we're bored is oftentimes when we start putting our elbows on the ends of chairs, on the couch, on, resting, whatever. Like when I'm in the car, this is the biggest thing. We're driving down the car and you're starting to get bored and you put your arm up on the window. And I just know the moment my elbow starts leaning on something, the very next thing that's going to happen is my fingers are going to start searching. They're going to start their search mission. And so if I can remind myself not to rest my elbows on anything, that makes a huge difference. Because if I am not in that posture, that's kind of like my cue for my behaviors. And so if I sit up straight, and I remind myself, like every once in a while, I do a little wiggle and I sit up straight, that really helps to keep my system engaged. For those of you who do yoga, you also can probably relate to, that also keeps the information in your spine, aligned and flowing beautifully. So that's really helpful, but no elbow leaning. That's one thing I remind myself. Also, when I'm getting ready in front of the mirror, I found that instead of like leaning in again on my elbows, I used to like look at my face and start like excavating for whatever was in here. If I stand up straight, or sometimes I even stand on one foot, and that is such a great, simple thing you can do that totally changes your experience of being in front of the mirror. Because the moment you're standing up straight, and or if you really want to challenge yourself, you're balancing on one foot, all of a sudden, all of those physical cueing mechanisms to do your behaviors are interrupted. So I offer that as just a really simple thing that you can do to be able to prevent your behaviors from even starting, because it's way easier to prevent the starting of your behaviors than to stop, because there's just such a reward cascade in the brain. And some of us have practiced for so many years doing these behaviors that the moment that you start, it feels like a snowball, and it's really hard to stop because so many happy brain chemicals are released when we do them. So if we can do things to interrupt the pattern before we start, that's really where the win is. And so for me, that's been a big game changer. Okay, so back to the toothpicks. All right, so one of the challenges I want to give each of you today. So right now is the time where we're going to all dive in and have one tangible thing that you're going to be taking with you into the holidays. Is I want you to bring your very own sensory specific fiddle. So I know a lot of us have tried a lot of things. Like I have piles of fiddles and toys and different things to keep myself distracted. And all of those things are helpful for a little while. But if you can find your own very specific, sensory specific fiddle, it will change everything for you. So here's my story of the toothpicks. When let me go like this. I'll answer it this way. I'm going to give you the secret. This is the single most important thing to find your best sensory strategy. And the question to ask yourself is, what do I want to do after my behavior? What do I want to do with the hair or the skin or the nails after I do my behavior? And when I asked myself this question, what I realized for myself is that I wanted to always put stuff to my mouth. I wanted to either rub it along my lips. So let's say I pulled a hair. I do like to look at it. So that was one part. If I can find a red root, it's like, ooh, the holy grail. For those of you who are hair pullers, I know you know what I'm talking about. So that's the one thing I would like to look at it in the light. But what I really wanted to do is I wanted to rub it along my lips, or I wanted to bite it, and I wanted to feel the crunch of the root bulb. And the same thing with my picking. Like when I would pick skin or pick scabs, I wanted to feel the texture of it in my mouth. Same thing with my nails. I wanted to crunch that texture. I love to bite the hardened sides of my cuticles. I wanted to have that mouth, that oral stimulation. And so once I figured that out for myself, then all of a sudden I realized that like all the things I was trying to distract myself were all finger things. You know, they were all nice things, but they weren't actually feeding the sense that I was most craving, which was oral. It was my mouth. And so what I found is that if I use flavored toothpicks, so for me, either like a strong cinnamon or a strong mint toothpick, if I put that in my mouth, and what I do is I do it before I'm going into what I know is a trigger zone. So I know for me, for example, working on the computer, like making this presentation to share with all of you is a super high trigger zone for me. That is really challenging for my body. That's when my urges get really loud. So what I do before I even lift my computer lid, open up my computer, I have a little box of flavored toothpicks that sits on top of my computer. And my rule for myself is before I open my computer, I put a toothpick in my mouth and I chew on that. And it makes such a difference for me because it gives me that stimulation. So I'm actually meeting my body's need before my body even tells me I have the need. And I feel like my urges are so much quieter. So I hope this is making sense for you. So I'm going to give you some ideas because I feel like this is something that's a really tangible, simple thing that you can do for yourself. And we all might have different senses. So again, I want you just right now in this moment, let's just wiggle a little bit so we can wake up our nervous systems. And I want you to think about, okay, what do I want to do with the skin, the hair, or the nails after I do my behavior? Like what is the win? Like what is it that I just love to do afterwards? And then you're going to get an idea of the senses. So I think about, do I want to look at it? Some of us do, like we want to inspect like the roots, or we might want to look at the skin or the scab or the nail. Some of us might love the sound. Some people I've talked to, they love the sound of the pop when they pull the hair, or they love the sound of when they chew their nail. They love that internal sound that they hear. Some people love to smell. Some people will pull their hair, and I've seen a lot of younger kids with trick, and they'll want to smell, things, or smell their skin. Is it tactile? Some people just want to play with, they love to feel the texture of the hairs that are different. You might want to be able to feel smoothness on your skin. We all have some different things. Some of us on the inside of our cheek, we want to feel that there isn't anything sticking out, or we want that all to be smooth. Taste, this was for me. So some of us want to put it into our mouth. We want to bite. We experience the world through our sense of taste or our mouth. And for others of us, it's just like body wide, like my whole body just wants to have some stimulation. So I'm going to give you, this is such an important area that I'm going to give you some suggestions about each sense. And it's okay if you're not quite sure. You can even try a couple of these on. And what you'll notice is when you get your primary sense that you're trying to stimulate, what you're going to feel is it's almost like there's a volume control dial, and that you'll notice that your urge volume will go down. I'm not saying it's going to be gone, right? Because there's all kinds of factors that lead into this, but you should notice a noticeable decrease in the intensity of your urge when you've met the specific sensation that your body's craving. Okay, so, and I'm going to ask you to share with me. So as you're going through this, it'd be great to write down either on your phone or jot it down, what's going to be your specific sensory specific fiddle. And I'm going to ask you to start putting them into the chat so you can inspire each other. Okay, so for sight, so if you want to inspect it, some other ideas are to give your eyes some stimulation. So you can look out a window. That's a great way. You can watch moving clouds. You can look at stereogram images. I don't know if you know what those are. Those are like those funny images where you can't tell what it is, but when you stare at it, that they kind of pop out and become 3D. That's something my daughter loves to do. In fact, we were doing that this afternoon on the couch. So just like staring at a stereogram image and seeing them come out 3D. Gazing into a crystal. So I always have a crystal close by. I love them for many reasons. I love to rub along the edges, but you can also look at all the different colors and facets that are in a crystal. You can look in a mirror, or you can use a sensory glitter jar. I did these a lot, especially with the kids I worked with. And sensory glitter jars are super easy to make. You can make them at home just with like a simple jar. You just put in some water and some glitter glue. You can put anything else in there that you want, and a little bit of food coloring. And it's just something that is super captivating for the eyes. So if you're primarily driven by looking at things, this is a great go-to fiddle. All right, if you're craving the sound, I want to hear the sound of it. One thing I sometimes do is I just plug my ears and I listen to my heartbeat and my breathing. So that's a nice fiddle. That's something that's with you all the time. It's really great. Some people love to pop bubble wrap or listen to certain music, listening for birds, hitting a singing bowl or some kind of a bell and listening as the sound disappears. So other ways that you can support sound. All right, smell. If you find that you want to smell something, you can have different ways. So you could smell an essential oil. I'll give you some suggestions. You can smell coffee grounds, you can smell flowers, or you can try alternate nostril breathing, which for the sake of time, I won't go through here, but there's something called pranayama. I'll put it in the chat for you, pranayama. And you can look it up if this is something that you're interested in learning. It's alternating between the left and the right nostril breathing, really grounding and calming for the nervous system. And so in addition to the benefits of smells, 2 essential oils I always keep in my purse are lavender essential oil. Here's a little research on this. So lavender is great because it decreases anxiety and improves mood. And so it's one of those great things to go to when you're revving high. When your system when you're finding your hands are cold, you're feeling anxious, just the smell of lavender helps to start to calm your body. And it's a really safe, gentle oil. And so this is one of my go-tos that I use when I'm feeling anxious. And when I'm feeling understimulated, so again, if I'm like riding in the car, zoning out while I'm watching TV, working on a presentation on the computer, I'll often reach for peppermint essential oil. And here's some research on this. Peppermint essential oil increases the depth and force of breath, and it improves energy levels and physical performance. So helping with that alertness. And so again, if we're looking at the ultimate goal, what we're trying to do is, again, coming from the place that we don't do these behaviors for no reason, that we're meeting a need of our body. So we're looking at how can we keep ourselves in the just right zone. So when we're tending to rev high, what can help bring us down? And when we're revving low, what can help bring us back into the range? That's what we're trying to do. Because if we can kind of hang out into in the okay zone, like the just right zone of our nervous system, we're going to find that our urges, the volume of our urges, is going to go down significantly. All right, touch. If what you want to do with the skin, hair, and nails is you want to play with it, then some other options are to have silly putty. So this is something that my daughter has found really helpful. If you love to feel like the texture of the hair, like a crinkly, thick hair, you can tie a piece of floss in knots, or some people use fishing line is another really great one. Tie it in knots, and then you can rub your fingers along that. It's really, really calming. You can count the beads on like a meditation, a mala bracelet, or a full mala necklace with your fingers. That's something that I do really routinely, especially when I am out. Like I always laugh. I don't really wear much jewelry, but I almost always have some type of a mala on me, mostly so that I have something to finger when I'm sitting still. You can use a finger fiddle toy, or running your fingers through a bowl of dried beans is like ridiculously luxurious and wonderful. So give it a try. If you have not put your fingers through a bowl of beans, you're in for a treat. If you're like me and you want to eat it, or you want to feel it on your tongue, chew on flavored toothpicks. Again, for me, that has been, I would have never guessed that a flavored toothpick was going to be so impactful in my life. Gum can be really great. I do suggest that people seek out gum that doesn't have artificial sweeteners. A lot of the sugar-free gums have artificial sweeteners. So now there are lots of great chewing gums that have kinder sweeteners in them, either sweetened with monk fruit, or sweetened with cane sugar, or sweetened with xylitol, something that isn't one of the Splendas, aspartame, those type of artificial sweeteners, because those are very irritating to the nervous system. Teething toys. A lot of the kids that I worked with really benefited from having something, a teething toy, and sometimes we'd even freeze it so that it was like a cold teething toy. Just to be able to have something to bite on was really calming and satisfying to the body. And now they even make teething jewelry, so that it's something that you could wear out in public that you wouldn't. Jewelry, yeah, that is no big deal to wear. A sonic toothbrush I learned from a physical therapist. This was a really great tip. We have so many nerve endings in our mouth, and so using a sonic toothbrush just to stimulate your gums is amazing. Also using a tongue scraper. I do all these because I'm so oral, so I'd scrape my tongue. For tickling my lips, like sometimes I love to take a makeup brush, and I'll like just gently tickle my lips around. I can just feel tingly when I'm even describing it to you. Or like a great lip scrub. These are all great ways to stimulate the oral area. And then the whole body. So if you're like, I don't know what my specific one is, then try your whole body. So a couple things you can do for your whole body. You can use a skin brush, and you can brush your body with that skin brush just to give your whole body skin some stimulation. You can do some scalp massage. To me, scalp massage equals love. Like my husband knows that if he wants to show that he loves me and I've had a long day, I just lay down and he rubs my scalp. It's just like, that is my happy place. Jumping on a rebounder is a great way, like a little mini trampoline. You can tap your body, you can massage your hands or feet, you can, like Chelsea and I were talking about, you can take a hot or a cold shower or a bath. And when in doubt, one of the best ways is to wiggle. So let's just take a 2-minute break and let's wiggle together. I'm going to back up because we've been sitting for a while. And so just go ahead and stand up and just really wiggle your system. This is so great to be able to wake up your body, feed your brain, your nervous system. It works on both ends. It works when you're overstimulated. It also works when you're understimulated. So when in doubt, if everything I've shared feels like, I don't know if that goes, that's going to work for me. When in doubt, wiggle, 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 wiggle. Okay. That feels much better. Okay, so that was a lot from me. So I want to hear from you, and I'm going to challenge every one of you who's on the call right now. In the chat box, I would love for you to write in what is an idea you have. And I know you're still going to try it out, but what's an idea that you had while I was presenting of your sensory specific fiddle? And I want you just to write it in the chat because we can share with each other ideas and inspire each other. And so go ahead and blow up the chat with your ideas. And I would love to have Hannah just read a couple of those out loud to us, but just keep them coming in because this was just a handful. And again, we're all experimenting. We're all trying these things out for ourselves. And all that matters is what works for our own unique bodies. And so a lot of these things that I've sharing with you, I've learned from other people. And because they've tried it and it's worked. A lot of these things also I've learned from kids with autism who also have these behaviors. And one of the gifts I've received from working with them is that a lot of the usual things, there isn't any, there wasn't any emotional therapy that was impactful at the time when I was working with these kids. And so really, instead of addressing things from the psychological perspective, I really was focusing on the body. How can we focus on the body? Because when the body is less stressed inside, then the behaviors on the outside are also reduced. And so I like to remind that, the kids were so transparent in what worked for them. It was a really great and obvious learning for me. And so I think that's just a good reminder for yourself that it's the more that both your brain, your psychology, and your physiology, your body, the more your brain and your mind, the more that your body and your mind are soothed and nourished on the inside, you're going to see that translates to less irritation on the outside, less urges and behaviors on the outside. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do from the inside out. All right, so Hannah, do you want to read a couple of these to us? I see all kinds of things coming in the chat.
There are tons. So from the top, there were so a worry stone for a smooth surface, gloves, ice at the initial urge, soft makeup brushes, using a retainer at night, oatmeal texture, papaya seeds, peeling glue off of surfaces and rolling it between your fingers, hedgehog rings, knitting, soft sleeves to rub on your lips, keeping a pen in your hand to fiddle with it. Yeah, I'm a firm believer that anything can be a fidget.
Anything.
Water bead stress ball, rubbing beads on a bracelet, needle felting, painting nails. That's a good go-to. Wacky tracks, scalp massager, mesh and bead fidget, edamame popper fidget.
I got that one.
Love it. Roll-on aromatherapy, anxiety. Oh yeah, to keep in your purse. Sandpaper on sticks. Somebody said, I like to keep a smooth worry stone that I found on the beach in my car to reach for when I feel the urge to pull when I'm driving. It also feels cool to the touch, which I like.
That's beautiful. So I'm going to, just for the sake of time, because I still have lots more I want to share with you, I just encourage you, keep putting your ideas in the chat box and inspiring people as we move forward. But one thing I'm going to challenge you on is I found that rather than having a whole box of fiddles, it's actually really great to get very specific and find one or max two things that are really meeting the needs of your body very specifically, and make sure that you always have them. So really the ease is the key. So for example, I have so many boxes of toothpicks. I have one that sits on top of my computer. I have a box that sits on my car, on the seat of my car. So before I turn on my car, I put a toothpick in my mouth. Before I open up my computer, I've put a flavored toothpick in my mouth. I have one on my bathroom mirror if I need it. So it's really about having it really easy and accessible and something that you can reach for all the time. So, and again, it doesn't have to be like anything fancy or expensive. Like for me, it literally is a toothpick was a huge shift for me. So I really acknowledge these are all such, I see that I went into the chat box. These are like just beautiful ideas. So keep coming and really give yourself the gift of having that one sensory specific fiddle, something that you can bring with you anywhere you are. Okay. This brings us to gem number 4, and this is to give your self permission to take breaks and give yourself time to recover. So holidays can be super overstimulating. Bright lights, loud music, constant activities. And I want to share with you some research so that you can understand that this isn't in your mind. It's not that you're too sensitive. And there actually is really beautiful research being done specifically on those of us with BFRB. So I'm going to summarize this for you. In general, adults with clinical BFRBs reported increased sensory sensitivity. So increased sensory sensitivity means that we experience things a little more intensely than the average person. Here's another dissertation paper, and this one talked about those of us not only have increased sensitivity, but we also have difficulty filtering out the stimulation. So what that looks like is, you know, when we're in a loud room, let's say, our brains might have a hard time kind of filtering out all that background noise and being able to focus in on talking with a person. I know that's super true for myself. Like it's very hard for me to talk on the phone in a loud room. I feel like my brain completely like goes blank and I just start stuttering. And so I have to like remove myself and get some more quiet because my brain has a hard time filtering out sound, you know, extraneous sound. And here's a third piece of research that talks about those of us with BFRBs may tend to over-respond to external sensations. So when we put these 3 pieces of research together, we see that we may have increased sensitivity to all of our senses, and our brain has less filters to those sensations, and we have a tendency to over-respond to that stimulation. It's not rocket science to see why some of these holidays and parties and things are challenging for us. And I don't know how it is for you, but I find it really comforting to be able to better understand myself and my brain, and to know that it's not just something that I made up in my mind. It's not some flaw or lack of willpower that I have, that our brains work a little bit differently. And so some of the things I found really helpful. The first is just to simply take frequent bathroom breaks. I feel like this is like one of the most underutilized thing, and especially for those of us women. Like, my husband has no problem like going into the bathroom, and he'll like spend 45 minutes in there, like, I don't know, reading the paper, thinking about the day, you know, and when I go in, I'm like in, out, 2 minutes. And it's really a lost opportunity. I mean, that is one of the places where we can go where you just get a break from all the sensory stimulation, so that's one thing I'll encourage you, is just take frequent bathroom breaks and take your time, just enjoy. That's kind of like your sensory deprivation zone where you can center yourself. You might want to bring sensory soothing activities to the party. So I know someone mentioned knitting, coloring books, journaling, some things that you might find sensory soothing can be really helpful at parties. Some people wear earplugs. Like if I'm at a really loud party, or I end up, because of my husband's work, I go to a lot of concerts, I actually wear earplugs. They make earplugs now where you can still totally hear conversation, but it drowns out the background noise. And that really helps me at parties, because otherwise I end up feeling really overwhelmed. And it's hard for me to connect with people. And I really do want to connect with people. It's just the environment doesn't work very well for me. You can wrap up in a weighted blanket. Again, keeping yourself nice and warm. Give yourself time to recover the next day. So we spoke about that with Chelsea, so both before and after. Just consider the fact that for a lot of us, it's pretty brave and courageous what we do with our sensitive nervous systems. We still are, go out here and put our hearts and our sensitive beings out in the world. And just to appreciate that that takes a lot. And so to give yourself time to recover the next day, just with some quiet, whatever works for you for centering and grounding. I've learned to be a lot more selective in my yeses to invitations. I don't have to go to every party. In fact, I, just kind of select the ones that are most important to me. And so for the sake of time, I will keep this share short, but would just love to have you write a couple things about any sensory sensitivities that you've found helpful. And maybe we can hear from one person. If you'd like to interact and share with me, you can raise your hand. Can you relate to any of this? Have any of you noticed that you have sensory sensitivities, whether it's to noise or to light or to textures or clothing, to tastes, to smells? Can you relate to this? And is there anything that you found helpful?
We've got Hillary ready to respond.
Great. Hi, Hillary. Hi, Hillary. I can hear you. Or I thought I could hear you. Hillary, I think it might be good. Why don't you go ahead and write it in the chat. I apologize that we can't hear you. Yeah, or your mic isn't working. That's fine. You can go ahead and write what you had to share in the chat, and we can relate to it that way. Yeah, so sensory sensitivities is something that I found is a big missing link for myself and my daughter. There's lots of things that are helpful and I found helpful along the way, but this was a really big part of the puzzle for us in being able to support ourselves and really be able to find out, what was behind the urges. I see that Brandy put in meditate prior to the party to get relaxed and focused. Yes, all of these things to be able to kind of ground ourselves and get ready. Helps me to have time off, recovery time on my own, usually more than one day. Yes, absolutely. I can relate to that as well. Great. Okay, let's go on to number 5, because I think this is one that for a lot of us can get overwhelming. And so gem number 5 is to prepare for small talk and awkward questions. And so before we dive into that, I just want to acknowledge what Hillary said. So Hillary said, I was going to say that loop earplugs were a game changer for me. I never realized how much noise bothered me until I started wearing them. Clothing labels are annoying. Also, the noise is uncomfortable. Yeah, for a lot of us, I didn't realize to the extent that sound, I was sensitive to sound either. And that was a real big wake-up call for me, because I actually can enjoy things so much more now that I recognize that sound sensitivity that I have. Thank you for that share. Gem number 5, prepare for small talk and awkward conversations. Okay, here's what we're all dreading. Like, if we're really honest and we're heading to a holiday party, what we're most worried about is that somebody is going to say, did you know you have a bald spot? Or how come you have so many Band-Aids? Or what happened to your eyebrows or your eyelashes? Or the super unhelpful relative who says, oh, well, why don't you just stop? I say these with a smile on my face, but there's nothing funny about being in these situations. I've been here many, many times. I'm sure a lot of you can relate. And so one of the things I found really helpful for myself, and especially for my daughter, Jaden, is just acknowledging and preparing that they invariably are going to happen at some point, and to feel ready, so that it doesn't catch you off guard. So you already know how you're going to address this. So I wanted to share this research with you. This is on the impact of shame. And so increased feelings of shame increase the urge to engage in BFRBs. And a lot of these questions trigger a lot of that feeling in us. And so at this point, what I want to acknowledge to all of you, and I just wanted you to take a moment and breathe into your heart. And I want you to really hear this from me to you. I want you to know that these behaviors aren't your fault. You didn't choose to be in this club, in this BFRB club, although we love each other. None of us chose to be in this club. You don't do these behaviors for no reason. Your brain has differences in how it works. It's not a simple habit that you can just stop. It's not a lack of willpower on your part. And there are things that can help. And I want to say these things to you because I know I wish someone had told me these things when I was younger, because I hid behind a lot of shame. And we already have these sensitive systems. We don't need to layer on a whole bunch of shame on top of that. And so I just want you to be able to recognize that and put your shoulders back and really understand that that this sensitivity you have is also a strength, and that there are things that can help. And so I just wanted to share with you just a handful of the studies that have been done that simply show that those of us with BFRBs have measurable differences in how our brain functions and in the structure. So this isn't at all a weakness that we have or just a bad habit that we have. There are reasons why we tend towards these behaviors. And again, I believe that we're meeting a need of our brain and our nervous system. And so we're learning new ways to relate to the needs of our body that can be as effective, but don't end up with bald spots and scars and nails issues. So I'm just going to share with you real quickly. I found this really fascinating. So I did a brain scan on my own brain. I was super interested in this brain research. And so there are 3 aspects of the brain. There are others too, but there are 3 that are significantly affected. One is the gear shifter of your brain. It's called the anterior cingulate. And here's a typical brain. Again, when you're in a tube getting a brain scan, your gear shifter shouldn't be active. And then here's mine. You can see that it's, I have quite activity. Mine is stuck. Even when I'm in a tube, my poor little brain is like still grinding. It just has a hard time shifting gears. Here's the gas pedal of the brain, the basal ganglia, and at rest, it should look like it's at rest. And here's mine when I'm at rest. My basal ganglia, white is the hottest, most active color on a brain scan. So my gas pedal is still full tilt, even when I'm at rest. And here are the brakes of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, and normal brakes look nice and smooth and perfectly, they have perfect edges. And on a brain scan, these are my brakes. And so it's hard for my brain to stop. This is why it's so much easier to prevent behaviors from happening than to start, because a lot of us have weakened brakes. And so I share these brain images with you just so that you can be assured that even though we have differences in our brain anatomy and in our function, we can have gloriously brilliant, creative, wonderful lives. It's really learning about how to work with our brains and our neurology. And so there's nothing to be ashamed about. Your brain just works a little bit differently. And so that's a great thing to remember, especially when we're in relationship to all kinds of our family and friends, especially I know for a lot of us, families can tend to trigger us. I know for me, that's true. And so here are a couple tips that I can share. So first is just to have an answer ready, so in response to all those, like, do you notice you have a bald spot, or, oh, you have a lot of scars on your body, or, oh, why don't you have any, your fingernails are all chewed down. One of the things that I've often shared is, you don't need to feel badly, because I'm sure you didn't know of this, but I have a medical condition that causes this. And that's just like a super simple, easy thing to go to, doesn't require any explanation. And the truth is that we do. There's nothing to apologize for. There's nothing to be embarrassed or ashamed about. This is no different than having diabetes or heart disease. We have a sensitivity in our brains and nervous systems. And so just like the manifestations of all those other conditions, this is ours. So that's one of the go-tos that I often will say if somebody, confronts me directly. Another thing I've found that's helpful in just this idea of small talk and conversations is, because I'm so sensitive to sound and overstimulation, and also because the stupid comments often happen in big groups, which is the worst place, I love grabbing one person at a time to connect with. So just grabbing somebody and going to a quiet corner of a room, bringing a non-caffeinated cup of tea. So like, this is chamomile tea I'm drinking right now. Tulsi is another one that they're both very soothing for the nervous system. So in addition to being warm, they're soothing. So I'll just sip on a cup of tea. And that's also nice because it gives you a specific time, so this sounds so silly, only somebody else with social anxiety would relate to this, but so I can drink my cup of tea as slow or as fast as I want to, depending on how the conversation's going. And then when it's done, it gives me a logical place to stop, and I'm going to go refill my tea. And so that's just a little like tip for if you want to have a way to gauge the length of a conversation. I found that to be really helpful. And then rather than just being at the mercy of like boring small talk, think about go-to topics that you enjoy talking about. Like, I love talking about gardening. I love to talk about food and perennial vegetables and nutrition and music, you know, so you don't have to be at the mercy of just like the societal, like stupid questions that we ask each other, you know, like, what do you do for a living? Or, you know, how are you? So I often just ask the first question. I don't wait for the person to ask me. I ask like, what lights you up these days? Or just any other question besides the normal superficial talk question. And then you might find yourself in like a really joyful conversation, an unexpected conversation. And the last tip I'll offer is to breathe into your feet. So this is something I recommend often, you know, when you're engaging, especially if you experience some social anxiety, just to keep pulling your energy back into your body, pulling the energy down, and imagine, you know, that you're breathing into your feet, that you're rooted through your feet into the earth. It's a really great practice. No one can see that you're doing it, but it keeps helping to pull the energy down, keeps the anxiety down, keeps the energy down, keeps me more into my heart than in my head, which is a much more joyful place to be when I'm connecting with other people. All right, so I think that this is a great spot. I wish I had more time because we could talk about this endlessly, but if there are any things you'd found helpful in awkward conversations, feel free to throw that in the chat so you can share with each other. And with that, I'm going to close and give you the most important gem of all, which is this. When you are looking for maximum freedom, you really want to support your psychology, your mind, and your physiology, your body. And one of the most helpful things that I've learned throughout my personal experience and my clinical experience is that it's often easiest when, and most effective, when your mind is the one that's really stuck, then focus on giving your body the support. And that's going to make a shift in your mind, you know? So that might be when your brain's really stuck, maybe you do some yoga, you stretch your body, and that's going to help with loosening your mind. And vice versa is true. When it's your body that's really aggravated and really struggling, that's a great time to then put some extra attention into your mind and to do some of your mindfulness practices. And that's going to help to calm your body. And so really supporting your mind and your body are going to give you the greatest freedom. Okay, so with that, what I would love to close with is to hear from just a couple of you. And I want all of you to do this. Again, so we've talked about all these things. We've spent this time together. And what matters is that what are you going to take into your life and put into practice? So I'd love for you right now just to think about 2 things that you can do to set yourself up for more freedom during the holidays. So 2 things that we talked about. So here's kind of a summary of all the things that we talked about. And again, you don't have to do all of them. I think it's really great to just not overwhelm yourself. Just choose 2. And I would love to hear from just a couple of you as we close. I know we're a couple minutes over, I apologize. But just from a couple of you, what are the 2 things that you're inspired to do to help really set yourself up for freedom? So go ahead and put up your hand and I'll call on a couple of you and just to hear what you're taking away. What are going to be your 2 gems that you're going to bring into the holidays with you? I see someone coming in on the chat box. So we've got frequent breaks and wiggles. We've got eat less sugar and take breaks. Beautiful. Would anyone like to have their voice heard and go ahead and share? I'll try to keep my blood sugar balanced and take more frequent breaks. Bring nuts with me.
It looks like Melissa wants to share.
Great, Melissa, I'd love to hear from you. Hi, Melissa.
Oh.
mute. There we go. Okay.
Hi, Melissa.
Hi. Great talk. All of the points and the gems are fantastic. I will take away, be prepared to be bored. I find that even in my family gatherings, my brain starts just, I've had enough. I want to leave. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is to make myself comfortable. Not feel like I have to, look like I have my act together, I guess.
Totally right. This pressure that this pretend made up pressure that we have to somehow make the holidays even harder than they already are. I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I see, so focusing on staying comfortable, making coconut date munchkins, toothpicks and soft fabrics. I love this. Plan my nourishment meals and walk in nature. Bring a game to play to break up the boredom. These are beautiful ideas. So I want to encourage you, you can go ahead and take just snap a photo perhaps of this page, just so you have all these ideas. And again, just make it super simple for yourself. You don't need to do all of them. That's not the intention. Take 2 of them, and maybe one of them being your sensory specific fiddle, and find one more that's really grounding for yourself. And I think you'll find that the holidays are that much better for you. So in closing, I just want to share with you, from my heart to yours, you aren't too sensitive. You don't need to go to every party. You don't need to stay until the end. You can show love in other ways besides large gatherings. It's okay to take breaks. You don't have to wear uncomfortable shoes. And you deserve to have a holiday that works for you. And your community understands, and we're always here. So I really want to encourage you to stay connected with the TLC Foundation. This is our community. This is your safe space where you are understood and you are valued, and you can connect with other people who completely understand what it's like to live with these sensitivities and working through these behaviors. And so one of the ways that I personally stay connected with the community is I make a regular every month donation to TLC. So I donate $100 every month. And every month as it comes out of my bank account, it's this reminder to me of, oh, this is something I value. This is a group of people that I want to stay connected with. And for me, if there was the one thing that I can tell you that has helped me get lasting results, not just intermittent results, but really to have results that last, is to stay connected with your community, to have that source of support so you can stay in the conversation. All right, so I'm totally rooting for you, and I want to thank you all for being here. It's been a joy to connect with you. I will stay on. I know we went a couple minutes over, so I am happy to field a question or two if anyone has any. Otherwise, it's really been a joy to be here with you.
We did have a couple of questions come in. One is, do you have any suggestions for liking the feeling of the root ball tip on my lips? Also for liking the feel of rough hairs?
Yes, because I love both of those too. So the stickiness on the lips, so that one is really great. I make a chia seed pudding with coconut milk or oat milk and chia seed, and the sticky chia seeds feel really similar on my lip as the root bulb does. So that's one of my go-tos. I also love the feeling of it inside my mouth, like I roll it around. So that's my go-to for the stickiness. And then for the feeling of the rough hairs, I found that fishing line is really helpful. I tie it into knots and I feel it that way. Or I get one of those hair samples that you can get from like salons that show like the different colors of hair dye, and I'll crimp it. If you crimp it, and sometimes they're even pre-crimped, and then you can feel that hair, and that feels really luxurious. So those are 2 tips I can offer you.
Wonderful, thank you. A couple more. Along the lines of preparation in the holidays, do you have any recommendations for traveling, such as going through metal detectors at the airport?
Yeah, that is a really hard time. That's where I talk about leveling the playing field. I think it's helpful. I know I wear hats a lot. And so they always ask me to take off my hat, to take off my jacket. So I always, I wear like a long sleeve, like a tight fitting, something that like a tension pressure garment is actually very soothing for the nervous system. So when I fly, I wear intentionally like a tight undershirt, and even sometimes like a tighter pants that are giving me some compression. And so that's something that they won't ask you to take off. And then if they ask you to take off a hat, and if you have a bald spot, I use Topic. And so those hair fibers, so that you don't have to worry about a bald spot. And so that's one of my favorite things. Again, don't feel bad about doing what you have to do to just level the playing field and, not have to deal with unnecessary stress.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you again. These are fantastic responses. Any recommendation on dealing with BFRBs / staying centered when you have very young, very active kids?
Well, yes. First of all, just the acknowledgement that it is very challenging to stay balanced when you have very young, very active kids. My whole practice was, my daughter Jaden would say, "Do you work with any kids who aren't extra wiggly, mommy?" She didn't know what autism was, but she knew that they were very wiggly, which I think is very sweet, the innocence of kids. So I think just first cutting yourself some slack, because it's really hard, but asking for help. That's one of the things I found most helpful is you do need to have some respite times where, like we talked about, the bathroom break. So everyone needs to have some time where there isn't someone completely tugging into your energy space and climbing all over you. And so asking for help to make that happen for yourself. An hour a day would be great, but whatever works in your particular situation. I think it really takes a village, and it's great to ask each other for support. So you can even do that with a friend, and take turns being able to give each other that little bit of a respite and break, where you can just like take an Epsom salt bath and light a candle and just completely like turn off, and not have to be butcher, baker, candlestick maker like so many of us are. So that would be another suggestion I'd give.
I like the butcher, baker, candlestick maker. And we've got a couple more questions, but unfortunately we've only got time for one more.
Okay.
So if you have any other questions, please email them to programs@bfrb.org, and hopefully we can get you some responses. So this question says, do you think that there could be a connection between insomnia and being a highly sensitive person and having a difficulty to switch it off?
So that's a great question. I think we're still learning a lot about the physiology of these behaviors. So we've been looking at the brain, and we know that there are specific differences in the brain. And of course, those specific differences in the brain can impact a lot of things, processes in the body, sleep being an important one. And so I would say that without even having the research available, to me, that feels really obvious that the answer is yes, because sleep is such a vital, really the most vital thing that we need to help our bodies. When we sleep, that's when we detoxify our body. That's when our body repair happens. That's when we basically recharge our batteries for the next day. So if we don't have the capacity to do that, our sensitivity and irritability is going to be heightened. And I find that anytime internally I'm more irritated, my behaviors and urges on the outside are a lot more intense. So I think there's definitely could be a relationship to that. And I think the other thing, exploration of that, a consideration might be to check in with your primary care physician and look at your cortisol cycles to see if your cortisol cycles are functioning optimally, because if your cortisol is raised at night, that can also interfere with sleep. And so that's something physiologically you might want to explore to support yourself.
Thank you so much, Dr. Christy.
My pleasure. This has been really fun. And as always, Hannah, like we always wish we had more moments together, but I guess that's just a reiteration of why it's so important to stay connected with the community, because we'll just keep this conversation going. It's just really such a joy.
Thank you so much, Dr. Christy.
My pleasure.
Well, your time, your tremendous insights, and for your love of our BFRB community. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you to everyone who shared such thoughtful questions and attended our TLC talk today. Thank you to the amazing TLC staff for creating this programmatic opportunity today, and to our TLC Espanol team for translating the entire event in Spanish. Thank you so much. Please remember to help us by completing the post-event survey, which is now linked in the chat. And don't forget, we've got a couple more events coming up to round out the holiday season. On Monday, December 27th, join us for TLC Hangout Kids Connection, specially designed for kids ages 6 to 13 who experience BFRBs. And on Wednesday, December 29th, join us to ring out 2021 and welcome in 2022 as a great big BFRB family. It'll be a family event that you won't want to miss, dancing and just being together. So we thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again before the holiday season ends. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Sending you love.